First guest this week's Dr. David Kunick. He's the CEO of UCS Advisors. David, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Don. Really appreciate it.
What's on the horizon for the cannabis industry next year, buddy?
A whole bunch of great things are happening. We're seeing the East Coast, East Coast, East Coast. A lot of people that were very successful early on in the cannabis industry are now taking their talents out here to the East Coast. Also, people that maybe have want to expand their national footprint are coming out here to the East Coast. So we're seeing a lot of very successful and also seasoned cannabis business operators come out here to the East Coast. The Safe Banking Act, we don't really know which way that's going to really fall. But as we tell the individual investor, once that Safe Banking Act changes, that's going to help open up the floodgates for a lot more capital and a lot more institutional capital hit the market. So if you're an individual investor that wants to still get involved in this industry, you need to act now or in the very near future.
It was kind of interesting. While we were preparing for this interview, I sent you a Boston Globe article that you had a good time with, basically saying that the prices of recreational marijuana in Massachusetts are plummeting. What's your comment on
that? This is a typical media headline where people need to peel back the layers and really digest the article. If you read that article, what's interesting is that what goes up must come down. And I won't say come down, it's more of it has to level out. Someone quoted in that article about people paying $20 for this one single joint. That's way too high of a cost. That price should be significantly lower. And we're going to start to see the market level out. And that's why it's really interesting where we look at Massachusetts, we look at Michigan, even the state of New Jersey. At the end of the day, you need to peel back those layers and you'll see how many towns are still not allowing any cannabis sales or even cannabis businesses in those towns. You're seeing larger operators, like the big multi-state operators that grew too fast, too soon, took on way too much debt. They're one of the reasons why prices had to go even higher because there's so much debt to cover and to cover their monthly overhead. So it's a great example of peel back the layers and don't read just the headlines.
Well, they tried to make the case that it was a supply and demand issue.
Yeah, they try to say it's a supply and demand issue. And when you really look at that supply and demand issue, it's also, what about medical cannabis? And if you notice, they don't talk about the recreational sales. They don't talk about the medical sales. Because the other thing is, too, is that more and more people are getting their medical marijuana card and using it as a medicine as well, too, because it's also cheaper tax-wise for them.
Well, I know that you've done a lot of work up in Maine. How's the cannabis industry going in Maine?
The cannabis industry in Maine is still growing very rapidly. It's a little cold up here right now. That's wearing the vest. And in the state of Maine, cannabis became the #1 agriculture product right now, surpassing potatoes, blueberries. So it's really interesting to see how cannabis is now the #1 agriculture product made in the state of Maine.
What are you anticipating going on besides the East Coast for the cannabis industry next year, buddy?
I think for next year, we're going to see, unfortunately, I think we're going to see some distressed assets. We're going to see some people who had licenses or granted licenses in states, but they can't come up with the capital or they can't come up with the real estate to make the business a reality. And you're going to see the overall cannabis market just consolidating overall. And I think you're not going to see as many mergers and acquisitions, but rather a lot of distressed assets plays being available next year.
So this is the consolidation that you and I correctly predicted a couple of years ago, maybe even further back than that.
Yes, we did talk about this on and off for the last couple of years, and we start to see that already happening now. And I think we're going to see that a whole lot more in 2023.
Now, I know in your career, you've been part of a cannabis company that was involved in testing cannabis. What's that industry going?
The testing industry it's interesting because some growers are really pushing their lobbyists to have less testing and to have less testing rules and regulations because it cuts too much into their profits. While other states are really pushing stricter testing laws to make sure that it's a quality product coming out every single time. And that also goes back to your comment about Massachusetts, supply and demand. You have some growers that are really growing a cheap product and having shortcuts, and it's leaving a lot of heavy metals or pesticides, and this or even other chemical impurities on the plant that you want to inhale or you want to ingest. No, you actually will do your body more harm than good. So I really see the testing lab market on both ends. What is interesting is we're starting to see some testing lab companies start to have testing labs in several states, so they can have very similar SOPs. So when the rescheduling of cannabis does occur, and it can do interstate commerce, they'll have testing labs strategically all around the country.
Well, it only makes sense because if you're taking cannabis for medical purposes to improve your health, you want the product to be as pure as possible.
Exactly. It's kind of like, when you take Advil, you're taking Advil. Same exact thing. If you're going to use cannabis for medicine, you want to know that's what you're getting every single time.
What's the one thing about the industry, and you've been in it for a number of years, that has surprised you the most?
Oof. That surprised me the most. I'd probably say what surprised me the most is still the amount of first-time business owners in this industry. And what I think is the most interesting aspect of cannabis is that this is now, it's almost 2023. It's an investor's market. There's plenty of deals out there. So you really have to have your act together. You have to have, if you're raising capital, you have to have your pitch deck together, your executive summary, your data room all put together, because it's an investor's market. It's no longer 2010. And it just surprises me how much the industry still has not matured in that sense as of yet.
Well, the industry's gone from making Cheech and Chong movies to making documentaries about scientific breakthroughs with cannabis. It's really interesting.
It really isn't. I mean, just if we look at the conference circuit and we look at the type of conferences being out there, we have a bunch of small regional conferences. You have conferences like MJ Unpacked, which is mainly for the consumer packaged goods and for investors. You have the Benzinga conference, what they have just for mainly investors. So it's kind of interesting to see how the market has really gotten a lot more specific as well too, and a little bit more niche.
Once again, UCS Advisors, Dr. David Kunick. David, your insight is always valuable. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Don.